The restaurant smelled of expensive candles and roasted meat, but none of it could mask the tension that sat heavily at the long dining table. My graduation day should have been the happiest of my life, a celebration of years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices no one in this room seemed to notice. Instead, it had become the stage for my parents' latest performance of entitlement and control. My mother's eyes glittered with something I refused to recognize as pride, while my father, in his sharp suit, wore the look of a man who expected obedience, not celebration. I had just lifted my diploma with trembling hands, feeling the weight of achievement and the bittersweet sting of knowing that the person I wanted to share this moment with most, Grandpa, was gone. His absence left a hollow ache in the pit of my stomach, one my parents seemed to fill with their demands. "You need to hand over your inheritance to your sister," my father said, cutting through the polite chatter around the table like a knife. His voice carried the same cold authority he always used when trying to bend me to his will. "It's the right thing to do. You don't need the money anyway, you have your education now." I stared at him, at the smug satisfaction that twisted his face, as if he were convinced this demand was just unavoidable. My fingers tightened around the edge of my plate, and I felt the memories of childhood betrayals flicker in my mind, the whispered comparisons, the punishments for things I didn't do, the subtle manipulations that had shaped me into the person I was today. "I won't," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You don't deserve Grandpa's money." There was a pause so long that even the clatter of cutlery seemed to fade. My mother's face paled, her lips pressed tightly together, and my sister's eyes widened in disbelief, almost like she had never considered I could resist. My father's face darkened, his jaw tightening as though I had insulted him with words too sharp to be polite. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his hand reaching for my diploma. In a gesture meant to humiliate, he held it over the flickering candlelight, letting the flames lick the edges until the paper curled and blackened, the ink melting into soot. The room went silent. Guests shifted uneasily in their seats, some glancing at each other, others pretending not to watch the destruction of my hard work. I smiled. Not a trembling, tearful smile, but a quiet, knowing one. My heart pounded not from fear, not from rage, but from the calm understanding that this moment, as much as it stung, was only the beginning of something far larger. I had prepared for this, even if they had not. My grandfather had believed in me, trusted me, and I had listened. Everything they thought they could take from me, they couldn't. Not now, not ever. Without another word, I stood, ignoring their gasps and muttered threats. Each step toward the door felt deliberate, controlled, a silent declaration that I would not be bent, broken, or intimidated. The flames behind me cast shadows across the table, flickering over faces contorted with disbelief, anger, and maybe, just maybe, the first inkling that the quiet, smiling girl they thought they knew was far stronger than they could ever imagine. The streets were quiet as I walked away from the restaurant, my heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that felt almost ceremonial. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and exhaust, but it couldn't touch the storm that had been simmering inside the dining room. My parents' voices, the gasps, the threats, they felt distant now, like echoes from another life. I had walked away from more than a meal. I had walked away from the chains they had tried to wrap around me my entire life. I found a bench in a small park near the city's edge, away from the glaring lights and prying eyes. Sitting down, I let the silence wash over me, letting my thoughts unravel. I could feel the adrenaline ebbing from my body, replaced by a calm so deliberate it surprised even me. I knew exactly why I wasn't shaking, why I wasn't crying, why I hadn't lashed out in anger. I had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it quietly for months without letting anyone notice. The calm wasn't weakness, it was strategy. I thought of Grandpa. His old study had smelled of leather and dust, of old books stacked high in uneven piles. I remembered sitting on his knee, listening to his stories about life, about patience, and about how some battles were won not with anger, but with foresight. "The people who think they control everything," he had said, "are always the easiest to outsmart if you know what you're doing." I had remembered those words every time my parents had tried to manipulate me, every time my sister had smiled as if she deserved what she hadn't earned. And now, sitting alone under the dim glow of a lamppost, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I hadn't lost anything. In fact, I had gained something they could never take from me: control over my own destiny. The diploma that burned at the table was meaningless compared to the months of planning I had done, the careful steps I had taken to secure Grandpa's trust and protect what he had left me. They thought my calmness was confusion or fear. They had no idea it was confidence. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memory of Grandpa's laughter fill the void. It wasn't revenge yet, not in the way they expected it. But it was a promise. A promise that every insult, every humiliation, every attempt to force me to bow to their will would be met, not with tears or fury, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty that I had the upper hand. The world around me felt distant, almost unreal. Streetlights flickered, cars passed lazily, and the wind whispered through the bare trees. I imagined the next steps, the lawyer, the paperwork, the reveal. I imagined the moment they would finally understand that everything they had tried to take from me had been untouchable all along. And I smiled again, softly this time, not in anger, but in anticipation. The night stretched on, empty yet full of possibility. I stood brushing off my skirt, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had endured their demands, their threats, and their cruelty, and I had emerged untouched. The real power, I realized, wasn't in proving them wrong immediately. It was in making sure they realized it on their own terms, in their own moment of disbelief. And when that moment came, I would be ready. I had always been ready. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old paper, a comforting aroma that reminded me of Grandpa's study more than it reminded me of any place my parents had ever taken me. I stepped inside, greeted by the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the soft shuffle of papers. Mr. Ellsworth, a man I had come to trust implicitly over the last few months, looked up from his desk with a small, knowing smile. There was no need for words. He already understood why I had come, why my parents' threats had barely scratched the surface of my calmness. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I did, watching as he arranged a neat stack of documents, each stamped and notarized, each one a testament to careful planning and foresight. The truth of Grandpa's intentions was laid out in these pages. I had known them, understood them, and, most importantly, respected them. My inheritance was more than money, it was a symbol of trust, a continuation of the legacy he had left me. And my parents had never even suspected how thoroughly I had protected it. As Mr. Ellsworth spoke, he guided me through the documents, the revised will, the trust fund that had been set up months earlier, and the contingencies that ensured my sister could claim nothing. Every detail had been accounted for, every loophole closed. My parents' pressure, their anger, their dramatic burning of my diploma, it had all been irrelevant. They had tried to intimidate me into giving away what was rightfully mine, but I had anticipated it quietly and meticulously. "You've taken every precaution," Mr. Ellsworth said, a note of admiration in his voice. "I have to say, most people would have panicked at the diner, but you remained calm, precise. That's why everything is secure. Nothing can touch it?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. My calmness at the restaurant had not been ignorance, nor had it been simple bravery. It had been strategy. Every detail of the inheritance, every legal maneuver, every quiet conversation with Mr. Ellsworth had been part of a plan my parents couldn't even imagine. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine their faces when they discovered the truth. The disbelief, the frustration, the shock. They would see that my calm demeanor at the diner was not fear. It was certainty. The diploma had burned, but the inheritance, the very thing they had demanded from me, remained untouchable. I could almost hear my father's rage, my mother's desperation, my sister's disappointed smile that had always masked entitlement. All of it would come to nothing. My patience and foresight had been my weapons, and now, for the first time, I felt the sweet satisfaction of their impotence. Mr. Ellsworth closed the folder and looked at me. "You've handled this perfectly. Your grandfather would be proud. And I suspect, in his own quiet way, he already knew you would." I smiled, but it was different this time, softer, triumphant, a smile that carried not anger but quiet justice. The calm I had displayed at the diner had been a mask, yes, but now it was a signal. I was ready. They would realize their mistake soon enough, and when they did, there would be no reversing it. No threats, no intimidation, no pleading could change the outcome. I had been calm for a reason, and that reason was this moment. The moment when they would finally see that nothing could undermine my victory. The following week, I returned to the city not for confrontation, but for closure. My parents had sent frantic messages and half-hearted calls, trying to gauge my reaction, testing whether their threats had left a mark. I ignored them. They were like children playing at power while I held the real control, quietly and completely. The lawyer had prepared everything, letters, documents, and notifications ready for delivery, but I wanted to witness the moment they understood the truth for themselves. I arrived at the family estate in the late afternoon, the sunlight casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth in my childhood memories, now felt like a stage for their realization. I had made no grand announcements. No threats, no dramatic gestures, only the calm certainty I had cultivated from the beginning. They were waiting in the parlor, fidgeting nervously. My father's face was flushed, his composure fractured by impatience. My mother clutched a silk handkerchief, her nails digging into the fabric. My sister, wide-eyed and uncertain, shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I could almost hear the questions forming in their minds. Had I given in? Was their plan finally working? I set the folder down on the coffee table and let it speak for itself. Everything you tried to take from me, I said softly, my voice carrying that same calm, unshakable tone from the graduation diner, has been untouchable all along. I watched their faces as they read the documents, the trust, the revised will, the legal protections. Their expressions changed from confusion to disbelief, then to frustration. My father's jaw clenched, my mother's eyes brimmed with tears of embarrassment more than grief, and my sister's mouth opened and closed as if searching for a response she didn't have. You've done all this, my mother finally whispered, her voice cracking. But how? I planned ahead, I said simply. Months before you even demanded I give anything up, I made sure Grandpa's wishes were secured. I wasn't reacting in fear or anger at the diner. I was acting with foresight. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. They realized at last that their attempts to intimidate and humiliate me had failed completely. Their greed, their entitlement, their cruel assumptions, they had all been meaningless. The diploma had burned, yes, but what they valued most, the inheritance, Grandpa's legacy, was mine, protected not by anger, but by intelligence and patience. I felt a warmth that was part triumph, part relief. Revenge had never been about hurting them, not really. It had been about preserving what was mine, about honoring Grandpa's memory, and about proving to myself that I would not be controlled or diminished by anyone's cruelty. My father finally broke the silence. I underestimated you, he said, voice low. Almost a confession. My mother nodded, her tears now silent and reflective. My sister said nothing, the first hint of humility in her eyes replacing entitlement with uncertainty. I smiled, a soft, victorious smile. I didn't need to gloat or demand apologies. Their realization, slow and inevitable, was enough. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, untouchable. As I left the estate that evening, the sun dipping behind the horizon, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had claimed my inheritance, preserved my grandfather's legacy, and most importantly, preserved myself. The calm I had maintained through the storm of their betrayal had been my shield, my strategy, and now, finally, my triumph. The world felt open before me, and for the first time, I knew that no one, not even the people who once tried to diminish me, could ever take my future away.